Good day again, everyone. We are now on part two of our lecture on understanding religious experiences. So we go into the theory of empathy. Empathy is different from projective imagination since it is an experience of the subject or empathizer occasioned by an object that belongs originally to the primordial experience of another subject or what we call as the empathized. The philosopher Edith Stein provides us the single most comprehensive account of this theory, following her mentors Theodore Lipps and Max Scheler. It is a theory which went at odds with that of her advisor Edmund Husserl. Ordinarily, empathy prefigures the metaphor of putting oneself in the shoes of the other person. This means that to understand other people, we have to try putting ourselves into their situation. From a philosophical standpoint, however, empathy is a general term which integrates the meaning of feeling with and feeling into the experiences of others. It approximates the meaning of the term compassion, which comes from the Latin words cum, meaning with, and passio, meaning feeling, which are in turn based on the word compati, which means to suffer with. Application. Erich Stein explains that this term is used to designate the most general way by which human beings understand aesthetic objects and eventually one another precisely as human persons. For Stein, therefore, empathy is an act specific only to human persons by which cognitive and affective communication is possible and in which we can discover, as the recent pop psych book would claim, the essence of what it is to be human. As a general act of understanding, empathy designates the fundamental cognitive and affective act by which the whole range of our cognitive experiences are grounded. Phenomenologically, it happens when we become the subject of the content of the experience in the original subject's place, and thus know what it's like to experience something from within in affective acts like joy or sadness. As a cognitive and affective act, it is the deepest holistic understanding that we can have about the other, since it enables us to grasp the values that serve as motivations for the actions of people. In this mode of knowing, both the physical body and the intellect work together to establish a more complete image of the other person that goes beyond the limits of a strictly rationalistic view of human understanding. It is thus a psychosomatic way of understanding the human other, irreducible to any other kind. It is a mode of knowing sui generis. Here, we can understand empathy as a sensibility, a capacity to be affected, which is affected through the psychosomatic constitution of our affective states. It is interesting to note how in its Greek equivalent, splagnizomai, emphasis is given on being moved from the inside in such a bodily manner that one's entrails, that is bowels, kidney, liver, etc., are shaken. This reference to corporeality highlights the essential visceral nature of empathy and human understanding, which as a whole implies that the whole range of human cognitive processes is only invariably constituted through sensations and feelings, thus confirming the age-old scholastic saying that there is nothing in the mind that does not pass through the senses. That this is the case is currently being confirmed by current studies in neuroscience. Modern neuroscience is continuously baffled by how this holistic relation between corporeality, affectivity, and intellectual consciousness all make sense within the structure of what can be accomplished and accepted as scientific. In particular, this capacity to empathize is traced to the living body's ability to be impacted, store, and generate images which the human mind can display and organize into a constant and systemic flow. Although the exact location in the brain responsible for empathy is still being debated by scientists, first identified with the area F5 of the brain's ventral premotor cortex, Its dependence on the physical brain for its operation provide additional argument for human rationality as essentially fissured by the operations of the body and its effects. In this scenario, the body as a generator of images achieves an equal, if not entirely higher status than the mind. Antonio Damasio, a renowned neuroscientist, claims that thought requires feelings and feelings require the body. Against the errors of Cartesian dualism, our identity and ideas cannot be reduced to a dried up cogito, devoid of all effects and determination by the body's base instincts. Instead, who we are and our thoughts are effectively territorialized throughout the body and eventually determined by the neural maps that are constantly connecting our mental images. This implies that our body and its experiences are all represented in the brain. And this makes it possible for us to generate images of our simulated body at will, such as scratching our backs or remembering the feelings connected with the memory of your first crush. So Damasio's claim is striking because it gives us insight into the structure of empathy as evidenced both by neuroscience and by our undeniable human experience. We can generate our own body states and also have the possibility of generating those of others, all the way from the emotional state to the muscular skeletal. As Carol Jeffers puts it simply, we can go from the body of the self to the body of another and through the body into the mind of another. Physiologically, empathy works when the same cells in my brain are activated as the brain cells of someone who I see perform an act, say holding someone's hand. Through the act of seeing the hand, we are able to mirror what is happening within the brain of the other person as if we are in the mind of the other. But it's not only the act of seeing that constitutes sensual empathy. Together with that visual perception is the motor response our body generates as a response to seeing someone hold a hand. Whatever these neuroscientists claim about these MRIs, however, it seems certain that every one of us can experience or can perceive what others experience both in mind and in body. Explaining empathy, however, in terms of neuroscience at the moment, cannot yet give us a complete account of how empathy is possible at all. The discovery of mirror neurons in the mid-1990s has helped neuroscientists identify those responsible for the cellular story of empathy in the head. Yet, it still remains a mystery how, in the words of the neuroscientist Marco Iacoboni, could these cells create some kind of magical connection between people? What continually intrigued these brain researchers was the fact that as MRI scans grow clearer and more accurate, neuroscience continues to be baffled by increasing questions about the codes hidden in these mirror neurons. The MRI scans of these strange and wonderful mirror neurons might be too interesting to behold, yet they merely report what are merely interpretative substitutes for a comprehensive account of empathy as lived experience. What MRIs can give us are only inferences about what happens in empathy, but not a first-hand experience of the magic that happens when you hold the hand of someone you love. So though an atheist at the time, Edith Stein's account of empathy exhibited a remarkable openness to the understanding of all human experiences irrespective of their origins. This can be glimpsed, in fact, at the conclusion of her doctoral dissertation entitled On the Problem of Empathy, where she brings up the problem of understanding religious consciousness from the perspective of the non-believer. And she says, I can be skeptical myself and still understand that another sacrificed all his earthly goods to his faith. I see him behave in this way and empathize a value experiencing as the motive for his conduct. The correlate of this is not accessible to me, causing me to ascribe to him a personal level I do not myself possess. In this way, I empathically gain the type of homo religiosus by nature foreign to me, and I understand it even though what newly confronts me here will always remain unfulfilled. So this above passage is instructive since we can illustrate from this the example of the phenomenological structure of empathy, wherein we distinguish the subject and the object of religious experience apart from the experience itself. And by a roundabout negative way, we can now see into the essence of empathy. So, the atheist as a subject understanding another subject, the believer reveals that empathy is not a simple feeling of oneness, although it is possible for two people to experience the same joy. For instance, the intensity of the respective joyful experiences may not automatically be the same. This illustrates oneness in content but not in the subjects. However, in the event that both subjects experience the same joy with the same level of intensity, there is the possibility of the we arising as a subject of a higher level. Empathy is a more fundamental act that grounds the possibility of the we, since it can become the condition for the feeling of oneness. So, in the case at hand, the primary subject of empathy is not a we or a plurality of subjects, but the atheist empathizer who is able to feel into the religious values of the empathized subject believer. Such feeling into the values of the believer, however, is only possible for the atheist by way of empty presentation. That is, he can still understand the experience of the believer, even though he does not have the content and the experience into which he can reduce this understanding of the religious person. Empty presentation happens when the feeling into the values of empathized person cannot have the possibility of fulfillment for the empathizing subject because those values do not belong or at least not yet open to the empathizer and his personality type. A person who has never tasted ice cream, for example, can empathize with the delight of someone consuming his ice cream, but he can never have the requisite objective sensual experience that corresponds to what it means to actually eat an ice cream. So, in this vein, the atheist who claims he has never experienced God or the mysterium tremendum stands at an empty ground when he feels with and feels into the value experiencing of the believer. That is, he does not have the requisite sensual, affective, and ideal content that underlies religious experiences. Yet, the objective existence of the values which he has felt with and felt into forces him into the recognition of an intellectual or spiritual realm which have been hitherto close to him. This realm, transcendent to both the believer and the non-believer, is revealed as objective and independent from his own experience and thus irreducible to the workings of his own subjective consciousness. This finally clarifies to us the essence of the empathy act. It is the present or actual experience given to one's awareness in the here and now of the feeling experience of another person where the empathizer becomes the subject of the content in the original subject's place, but this object content is present in the empathizer only in a non-primordial manner. Edith Stein herself provides us the illustration from her own experience when, while still an atheist, she narrates her wonder while sightseeing at a cathedral. A woman out on her daily shopping trip stopped by the church simply to pray for a few moments, taking a small break to have an intimate conversation with God. So, in this example, the visual perception of seeing the woman pray in the church is fused with the feeling of calmness generated by what is seen. The feeling of peace or serenity suggested by the calm deportment exhibited by the praying woman is empathizable to an outside observer who, even if not religious, is able to experience primordially the same feeling of peace generated in the woman's gesture. Stein, as empathizer, is thus able to feel with and feel into the prayer experience of the woman as something actually given in the here and now. Where Stein differs from the woman is in the givenness of the object. It is present to her consciousness in a non-primordial manner. She had not been the one originally praying, nor she had a direct perception of the object of prayer. Stein only has access to the object by way of empathic fulfillment and not through the direct perception in the here and now. The phenomenological analysis can be clearly summed up in the following table. So we have the subject empathizer in the person of the atheist with the religious believer as the empathized subject. The object for the atheist, however, is something that is non-primordial because as a non-believer, he does not have this actual experience of the numinous. So the experience of the empathizing atheist is the same feeling of calmness, which he also actually feels. And this feeling is something that is generated when the atheist has seen into the experience of the religious believer. In the experience of prayer, even with the calmness of the external gestures, such as kneeling and holding his hands. And those things are actual or simply what we call as primordial. So having explained this table, we can now proceed to claim that the whole intention in our phenomenological consideration of religion is the achievement of knowledge that is able to grasp the inner meaning and intentionality of the other person's religious data, which are expressions of his inner religious experience or faith. So this ends our part 2, and I look forward to see you in our next video lecture. Thank you, everyone.